Hi, everyone. My name is Sue Oberg, and I am the Director of Congregational Life here at King of Kings. I am so excited to be bringing you our very first online Bible study called Pure Joy, the study of Philippians. We have an amazing opportunity to study joy this summer. And I'm not talking about just momentary happiness, but pure joy. That title, Pure Joy, actually comes from a verse in James. James chapter 1, verse 2 says, "Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds." I remember the first time I heard that verse, I thought, Lord, what are you talking about? Pure joy in the midst of trials? How do we do that? And even though this particular verse is in James, it's really the book of Philippians that's going to tell us how to. How do we live with joy in our lives, no matter what our circumstances are? You know, there's been a lot of debate over the years in psychology and also in church circles talking about the difference or the sameness of joy and happiness. And even in the definition of joy, we see the word happy. But yet, in God's word, we also see that it is possible to have joy even when you're not happy about a situation. That you really can, that happiness is almost more to do with our situation and what's on the outside of us, whereas joy is something that comes from within us. It's the work that's going on within us. And so we really see in God's word that we can not necessarily be happy about a situation and still have joy. And yet, we also can be happy and not have that core of joy. I know that because I've actually lived it. Many years ago, my husband Dave and I talked about finishing our basement. And if you've ever had an unfinished basement, you know how it just turns into a collect-all for everything. All the boxes and bins and whatever you don't know what to do with. And so when you decide to do your basement, you have to move everything out for the guys to be able to do the work. So we did the logical thing. We started moving all the bins and boxes into the garage. Eventually, we had to go through all those boxes and bins and see what we were going to sell, what we were going to keep, and what we were going to pitch. And my daughter, Hallie, was about 4 years old, and she was my biggest helper during that time. And she got pretty good at telling me that something could be pitched, or we had to sell something, or we just needed to give it away. So we came to the boxes, one of the boxes or a couple of the boxes that I hadn't looked at for years that my mom had given me when she was cleaning out her basement. And on the side it just said Susie's stuff. And so we opened up those boxes, and to Hallie's delight, we found little stuffed animals and little trinkets and all sorts of little things that I had when I was little. Then we went on to the next box, and we found all my old art projects and all sorts of letters that I had even wrote my parents when I was at camp. We found even cards from my First Holy Communion and my confirmation. And then at the bottom of the box, we found a whole stack of my elementary school report cards. Hallie, being 4 years old, thinking that it was hilarious that Mom actually went to kindergarten, we had to open them up before we pitched them out. And so we opened up kindergarten to find in handwriting by the teacher, "Suzanne is a happy child." Then we went on to first grade. "Suzanne is a happy child," again, written in handwriting. And on, every single year, all the way through elementary school. Hallie thought it was hilarious. And so in a sing-song way, twirling around with one little stuffed animal in one hand and another stuffed animal in the other, she would say, "Suzanne is a happy child." And although that day was wonderful, and I remember laughing and looking at Hallie, something hit. I realized that happy child was gone. I wondered, where did she go? You know, it's almost as if the trials in my life, the sorrows, the griefs, just the everyday stresses of life had evaporated my joy. Just gone, just dried up, where I just felt like my bucket was empty. Even though I had those happy moments, that core of joy was gone. I came up with this idea of evaporating a few weeks ago when I was actually doing this study, looking at joy and happiness and the concept of both. And I put some eggs on to boil some eggs on the stove, and I forgot about them for a while, and all of a sudden I jumped up and I thought, I ran over and all the water was gone. And I realized, isn't that like life? Isn't that what it does sometimes to us? Is that it just dries us up, just burns out all the water that we had in our bucket. You've probably heard that concept before, like what fills your bucket? We all have that bucket, or that soul bucket that gets filled by the things we love. There's a story in John chapter 4, verse 1 through 26 that talks about a Samaritan woman who went to the well one day in like high noon, which was very unusual. And she meets up with Jesus, who asks her for a drink of water and then proceeds to tell her about living water that he can give her. As we look into that study a little bit more, we realize that it's about so much more than just a bucket and some water. It is about this woman who had been looking everywhere to find what was going to fill her up. She had been going from relationship to relationship. She was discontent in her life. I often wonder if her soul bucket was just empty and she was looking to all these other wells to fill it up. And Jesus offered her so much more. He offered her water that would not run out. In John chapter 7, verse 37 through 39, Jesus actually explains what that living water is. And he says, "Let anyone who is thirsty come to me." And then rivers of living water will flow from them. What that living water is and how he explains it, it is the Spirit of God that has been poured out to all believers. That's what that living water that will fill our bucket, it really is. What an amazing thing. That I want you to know that by faith and through God's grace and by faith, we have been saved. We have been given the Spirit of God. And with that comes the spirit of joy. But the thing is that many of us don't know how to live into that. We don't know how to live out our salvation and live in this new life that God has given us in the Spirit. And so the beautiful thing is he really has given us his instructions. And the Bible is our instruction for that. So this summer, we're going to be looking at Philippians, because Philippians is going to start to tell us, how do we live in that? How do we participate with God? We get an opportunity to participate in what he's doing in the world, in what he's doing in the church, but we also get an opportunity to participate with what he's doing right here in our hearts. In fact, that is the part that really needs to happen so that everything else can flow. I am so excited that you have decided to go on this journey with me through the book of Philippians. I want to tell you that I will have homework every week, and what I'm really hoping is that you'll do the homework, but I also am giving you a few questions. And I'm really asking you to just spend some time bringing those questions to the places that you are, whether it be around the campfire, at the beach, or even at the break room at work. Start talking to people about maybe what fills their bucket. I think many of us have been going to the wrong well, looking for joy in our lives. We go to the well of success or the well of money. We go to the well of relationships or whatever it might be. And maybe you're finding yourself at the same place that I was when I started this journey a long time ago. Maybe you're finding that your bucket is pretty empty. You know what? We want to discover what's in that bucket and how we can live with joy all the time. So I'm glad that you're here with me. I hope that you will join me next week. I'll have a blog post on the context and the background of Philippians and some more homework for you to do. During that time with God, that's when we really start to participate with the work he's doing right here in our hearts, right here in our soul buckets. Have a great week.